Hi, my name's Dr. Rebecca Huntley. I'm so sorry that I don't get to be with you all there at Parliament House today to talk about this terrific research. My 7-year-old twins were a close contact for COVID and they're COVID-free, but we do need to socially isolate for 2 weeks. So here I am in my lounge room, my bedroom, and well, it's quite apt really, because so much of this research shows it looks at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women's working and caring lives. And so I'm a bit of a case study for that today. It's such a joy and such a privilege to do this work for the Sydney Women's Fund. Myself and researcher Kate Whelan were lucky enough to do the first wave of this research, the inaugural study, in 2018. That research revealed a city divided, where significant numbers of women were unable to enjoy the choices, independence and equity that they needed and deserved. Sydney women work incredibly hard and they deserve a return on investment. The big themes of that 2018 report were things like planning for a retirement, for a secure financial future, housing security, of course, in Sydney, and experiences with discrimination and alienation from the decision-making processes that govern the lives of Sydney women. There was optimism. Sydney women are always optimistic and they love where they live. They are doing all kinds of things to contribute to their family, their community, their workplaces, and the health, happiness and prosperity of this city. 3 years on, we did exactly the same survey with exactly the same sample of women, and we really wanted to see what had shifted, but also how the pandemic had really affected women's lives. And really those initial insights were confirmed in this latest round of research, but with some important shifts in sentiment to note. Again, the 2021 research shows the strength and capacity of Sydney women, but it also shows that there still remain significant barriers to them trying to realise their goals. And if Sydney women can't realise their goals, then the full potential of Sydney cannot be realised. There is news to celebrate. The majority of Sydney women, so 72%, are satisfied with their lives overall, particularly their personal and family life. This satisfaction for some has actually deepened during the pandemic. In the qualitative research we did, the interviews, if women had a safe home environment, they had support in and around the home, and they had employment security, that time with family, not having to commute, having to be able to kind of be in control of your own time and manage work and family responsibilities through working from home, actually they talked about improvements in their health, improvements in their relationship, even improvements in their productivity at work. And Sydney women still feel optimistic about the future and still feel, about 62% feel that they can achieve what they want. They still love living in Sydney. They love their communities. There wasn't a woman that said, I don't want to stay in Sydney. I love the physical beauty of the city, the excitement, the dynamism. I love the community that I live in. That being said, many of them reflect on just the pressure of living in Sydney, the financial pressure, the social pressure, the cultural pressure. It's not just about housing prices, it's just about the general stress of the rat race. And they worry about how long they're going to be able to sustain living in Sydney if that gets worse. And even if they can stay, will their children be able to stay? What the research showed is that there were particular groups of Sydney women facing disadvantage, 2 groups in particular. Not surprising, those people on low incomes or people in precarious work. And for them, not just the cost of living in Sydney, but housing stress, absolutely huge. And we have seen a recent report show that the median price of a home in Sydney increased $7,000 a week during the pandemic. So you can have an economic downturn and you can have housing prices become even worse. So for those women who are on low incomes, who describe themselves as struggling or poor, they were much more likely to report negative impacts of COVID, of what happened during the pandemic, not just on their finances, but also on their enjoyment with work and mental health. So if you're in a profession where you don't have the luxury of working from home, and that includes many of our many people in the service sector, many people in the healthcare sector. If you were still having to commute and move around, particularly if you were in a lockdown LGA, then it was a very, very stressful year. Women with dependent children also stood out in terms of work and finances. Close to half of women with dependent children at home said they would like to work more, so there's a desire to work more, but of course there's a lot of pressures around trying to find that work and balancing that with, you know, in non-pandemic times, the commute and caring responsibilities. Those with dependent children at home far more likely to believe it's harder to live in Sydney now than it was 10 years ago. In addition to the survey that we did, this year we did something a bit different. We actually interviewed 10 women from across Sydney, 10 different women, very different backgrounds, different age groups, living in different parts of the city. That was terrific work and really augmented and kind of brought to life and meshed really well with the quantitative part of the survey. Again, what we found in those interviews is that Sydney women love this city and their own little corner of it. Those who are younger and more economically insecure can struggle to see a secure financial future in this city on their own terms. So as in, without family help, they wonder what their trajectory of well-being and happiness is in the city. These women have continued to work and care for others during the pandemic, some working harder than ever before, not just in terms of having to keep your job going when you're homeschooling kids, but if you are in a profession which is precarious or where you're actually, COVID has dramatically changed the way that you've had to work. It was a very stressful period. And those women aren't always seeing the rewards for their hard work. I want to leave you before we go back to the people in the room and the panel, which I so wish I was part of. I want to leave you with a terrific quote from one of these interviews, a single mum from a migrant background living in the western suburbs. And it's in the report, but I want to read it out to you because it really epitomises for me just some of the challenges of that face hardworking Sydney women in terms of really getting the most out of living in the city. She said, people work longer hours in order to make more money and in order to live a certain lifestyle, and they do it mostly in isolation because everyone is doing their own little thing in their own little corner. And so you get very isolated, if not physically isolated, then mentally isolated. I find in Sydney, on a life satisfaction scale for me, it would rate very low. I have started to plan for retirement and that plan requires, 100% predicated on leaving Sydney. And it's also 100% dependent on me downsizing and living a simpler life. But even a simple life in Sydney is an expensive life. For Sydney to have a bright future, for our city to fulfil its great potential as a wonderful global city to live, that's diverse, that's a place where people from all kinds of backgrounds can really enjoy this city, then we really have to do what we can to make sure that the potential and opportunities for Sydney women, regardless of where they live and what they do and where they come from, is realised. Thank you so much.